This
So,
conference will now be recorded.
uh, we were talking about the compensation grade steps, right? We saw how you can define compensation steps uh, on a compensation grade, right? Or if okay, so if you have compensation grades without okay, so if you have compensation grades without grade profiles, then you would define your compensation steps directly on your grades. However, if you have grade profiles as well, uh, for our example, we had grade profiles and then we defined our compensation steps on the grade profile, right? So if I quickly uh, open, I think our grade was, so if I open compensation grade and for 6.2, I think WB6. Right? So within that grade, we have all these grade profiles, right? Each step, each grade is associated with grade profile. And if I go to the task compensation steps, I'll open this and okay. So if I go to compensation steps, that is where I can select a grade and look at the steps within that grade. If I check back, again, we have not defined any steps against the grade because we have grade profiles and we just defined step against one of those grade profiles, right? But ideally, you will define that against each of these grade profiles when you have the steps set up in place. Okay, then what did we do? We hired a employee effective 2010, and then to this employee we assigned compensation, and as part of that compensation we assigned him this grade, and within that grade we assigned him the USA grade profile, and within that system we assigned him the first grade step. So if I now go to the employee's compensation page and look at his details, apart from the grade and grade profile, he also has that step assigned. And the moment we assigned that step, system automatically was able to identify the corresponding salary plan. And against that salary plan, system automatically assigned him the corresponding step amount. Right now, this grade step we created, it cannot be overwritten, right? And that is why we are not able to change this assignment, right? So it is assigned by the system and this cannot be overwritten at the time of staffing or the comp change event. All right. So today we'll talk about how do we perform compensation step adjustments, right? You would definitely come across scenarios wherein you want to, for example, revise the amount against each of these steps. So tomorrow you realize that or after 4 years now you realize that the step amount should be increased, and this should be, let's say, 52,000, right? Or maybe this should be 95,000, and at that point in time there could be a number of employees who are already in that step, right? Now how do you handle the compensation for all those employees who are already assigned that step, right? So any new assignment, that is fine. Once you make those changes and then you assign that step to a new employee, that employee would automatically get assigned the new set of amounts. But for all those employees who already have that step assigned, you'll have to perform something called a compensation step adjustment, right? So we'll see how you set up adjustments to your compensation steps. Okay, as I mentioned, what is the purpose? You can adjust the compensation associated with the compensation steps, right? And what would Workday do? Workday would automatically adjust the amount for all employees with those steps. Okay. Apart from that, if you want to manually adjust the amount for any one of these employees, that is something you'll not be able to do because we have already seen that, right? Especially with this plan type wherein the step is non-overwritable, you cannot go ahead and change the amount for an individual employee, right? That is only possible if the step configuration says that the amount is overwritable. Okay, what are the processes? So for that, the first thing you need to do is, now not all uh, systems might require this, but then you would need to set up a compensation step adjustment business process, right? Let's see if this process is already enabled. Uh, okay. Uh, let's set space up. Okay, so this is the business process which is set up compensation step adjustment. Now, any adjustments you do for your compensation step, you may want that to go through an approval, right? Uh, so you can configure your business process definition based on your organization specific policy. So this is the default definition, doesn't have any approvals or any reviews configured. But then if you want, you would go ahead and set up this process, right? So that is the first task, which is to set up the compensation step adjustment business process. Okay, then uh, obviously you would need your compensation steps to be in place, right? The task for creating your compensation step adjustments is again set up compensation step adjustments, right? So if I open this task, let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is the task by which you would set up adjustment to your compensation step, right? All right, so you would select, okay, before doing that, there are a few other reports that you would want to run to just check all your employees who are eligible. Okay, sorry. So let me select, let's say 1/1/2000, not 1/1/2000, let's say June 1st, 2010, right? So I hired this employee effective 2010. The compensation has been assigned to this employee effective 1st Jan 2010. And now I want to set up adjustment to the step amount. I would go ahead and select the compensation grade. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll do OK. All right. Uh, I would select the event name because of which I am setting up that adjustment, right? So let's call this uh, WB 6th Feb adjustment 1, right? I'll select a reason for performing that adjustment, and I'm just saying cost of living, right? Okay, now there are these options that I'll have to define. Now, if a plan allows override or if the compensation step allows override, then there would be some employees who could be assigned an amount which is different from the amount defined on the step, right? So let's say this step allows override, and there could be an employee who is getting 51,000 instead of 50,000, right? Then in that case, how do you want to handle those employees who are using that override, right? So in this case, as part of grade profile, let me go in here and I may say the current amount is 50,000 and I want the new amount to, let's say, be 55,000, right? And or maybe let's say 52,000, this be 73,000, and this is 95,000, and let this be 100,000 because we have defined the maximum amount on that grade profile to be 100,000. Okay, now what if, so now the old amount was 50,000 and I'm incrementing it by 2,000, right, in this step, right? So there's a change of 2,000. But let's say there was already an employee who was getting an overwritten value of 51,000 and instead of 50,000, right? In that case, I can define how do you handle these kind of employees who already have a value or overwritten value, right? And the options are, you can say do not make any adjustments to these employees. So any employee whose plan amount is already overwritten, no adjustment would be performed for these kind of employees, right? The second option is adjust to need new defaults. So all those employees who are getting 50,000 or 49,000 or 51,000 or any other amount, overwritten amount in their compensation, they would all be adjusted to 52,000, right? And the third option is adjust by the same amounts. Now, what do we mean by this option? So let's look at an example. So let's say the old value is, let's assume 500 just for simplicity. The new value is, let's assume 600, right? So the difference between, so this is 500, this is 600. The difference is between these two values, the old and new value is $100 or 100 rupees, right? Okay, there is an employee who is already getting, let's say 700, right? So old value was 500, but this employee is already being paid 700, right? Now, when I say adjust by same amount, the difference between the new default and old default is 100. This employee's existing compensation is 700 and the option is adjust by same amount. In that case, system would adjust the amount of this employee by 100. So this would become 700 plus 100. So now he would be getting a difference, or the new adjustment for this employee or the new step amount for this employee would be 800. Okay, so this is applicable for those employees who have an over whose compensation is overwritten. All right, this is for those employees who are already using the default, right? So if some employee, the old value was 500 and this employee is already using that 500 default, then I have only two options: either do not adjust or adjust to the new defaults, right? In that case, I'll just select adjust to new defaults, right? I would say okay, and I'll go ahead and submit my request, right? It shows that the process is successfully completed. Let me go ahead and refresh my employee profile. Okay, now if you see, the employee's compensation is automatically adjusted to 52,000, right? Now if I look at the pay change history, here it shows 50,000 was the previous compensation which was given to the employee effective 1st of Jan 2010, and effective 6th of Jan 2010, this amount, the step reason I had selected, if you remember, was if I go to the uh, details, the reason was cost of living, and it says against employee's profile. With this reason, the amount has been adjusted to 52,000, right? So this is how you can set up your adjustments to compensation plans, and then assign those adjustments to all the employees. Okay, any questions till now? Okay, so you set up compensation step adjustment business process, or I would say configure compensation step adjustment business process, and then this is the task for setting up those adjustments, right? All right, so what are the options? The options is select the allowed actions for employees using defaults, right? And what else did we do? We set up the default options or actions for employees using overrides, right? And this only applies uh, to only those employees uh, who are actually assigned to the plan, right? So if a given employee is not even assigned to the plan, then this adjustment would any which ways not work. Okay, what else did we select? And, okay, what else did we see? We saw the option. What were the options? Adjust to new defaults, right? And this we saw is applicable for both employees using defaults. So this option is available for those both employees who are using defaults as well as override, right? And Workday sets the assigned value to the new default, right? So this option adjust to new defaults is applicable for both category of employees, right? And then there's another option. If I do not want to adjust the compensation of any of the employees who already have that assignment, I can select do not adjust. And then the final option we saw was adjust by same amounts, right? And this we saw is only applicable to employees who are using override, right? And what did we saw, or what did we see? We saw that Workday calculates the difference between old and new defaults, right? The employee's assigned value is adjusted by that same difference, right? So whatever is the difference between the old and the new defaults, employees assigned value is adjusted by the difference between these two defaults, right? Okay, So this is how you set up your adjustments to the compensation steps. Uh, Next, we'll look at something called automatic step progression schedule. All right. So now when we set up our compensation steps, right? Let me go ahead and so when we set up these let me refresh this as well. All right, so if I look at my compensation steps now, the amount on the steps have also been updated. So it is 52 and then 73 and 95 and 100,000. Okay, now against each of these steps that we have created, right? So we gave the sequence, the name for that step, the amount for each of these steps, right? Now, apart from that, we have also defined the step progression rule, and we have defined this in terms of the minimum interval the employee should stay in that step before progressing, and after that, if any progression rules are applicable, right? Now, ideally, because this employee was assigned to this step in 2010, right? He should now already be eligible for progression to the next step, right? Because after spending 1 year in that step, he should then move on to the next step in the sequence, right? Sorry, guys. Okay, now how do you handle this step progression? So Workday offers you this automatic step progression schedule, right? You can configure this and then or schedule this job or report, and then employees would automatically get progress to the next step in the sequence based on obviously their eligibility criteria, right? Okay, uh, so you can basically configure, as I mentioned, compensation step progression schedules, right? Okay, now there are a few reports available which we can use to identify whether employees are eligible for progression to the next step, right? Okay, guys, any questions till this point in time? Okay, so these are the reports. One is employee compensation step progression, and the other one is employee compensation step progression audit. So let me go ahead and open both of these reports. Right, I'll open this report as well as the first report. Uh, all right, uh, the first report, and let me run this from 2009 till today. Okay, now this report, the first report, basically shows me uh, the details of employees along with their current compensation step assignment, right? So if you look at our employees, right, uh, the last time the compensation was assigned to this employee, if I go to job and from there to uh, worker history, okay, so this compensation change event, right, that is the event which assigned this particular step to the employee, right? The step assignment date was 2010, and it basically identifies the estimated date as to which this employee would be eligible for progression to the next step, right? It also shows if this employee had any previous step assignment. So it shows the current step which is applicable on the employee as of today, as well as the old step. So this report basically shows the step assignment details for all the employees, right? On the other hand, the next report, it shows me uh, any employees for whom any compensation step progression has been executed or due to be executed, and it is stuck because of any other parallel process, right? So we know that already in Workday, if there is a parallel event in progress, for example, if there is already a compensation change in progress, I'll not be able to perform a change job, right? Excuse me, because system would say there's already a conflicting event in progress. So this gives me an audit of all the employees compensation step progressions, and if they are stuck somewhere, right, at this point in time, because we have not run any progression schedule, and that is why both these reports, they show no difference, right? They basically show me exactly the same information. Okay, let me go ahead and open a task, and the task is called schedule automatic step progression, right? I can select the frequency for this scheduling this step progression. So I can either run it now directly, or I can schedule it to run with a frequency, right? So either daily or weekly or monthly or any other occurrence frequency. So I'm selecting run now and okay. Okay, again, just like my uh, step adjustment, I would give a name uh, for initiating this request, and let's call this WB 6th Feb step progression, right? The reason for performing that or executing that step, and let's call it, there's no corresponding reason configured as of now. Yeah, there is. So the reason is automatic step progression, and because the employee has spent the requisite amount of time in this job. Okay, now here I can either select, and if the default setting, if you see, is select all the employees who are in this compensation step, right? And who obviously who are eligible for progression to the next step, right? Or I can select employees based on some eligibility criteria, right? Or I can only select a specific employee, right? So I don't want to progress all the employees, but let's say only one specific employee, right? Or what I can do is I can select all the employees, and out of them I can exclude certain employees for whom I do not want to run that compensation step progression, right? So now if I would select any one of these or a combination of these criterias, and then go ahead and execute my process. Okay, it says it is completed, and let's look at the process report. It says there are 3 employees. Now if you see, the step progression and audit report showed that there are 3 employees who are eligible for this step progression, and this also shows that it has actually processed 3 employees. If I go ahead and open those employee details, it shows that these 3 employees have been progressed, and this is the current step or the previous step, and this is the new step to which those employees have been progressed, right? If I go ahead and refresh this, let's see what happens. Okay, it shows me that this is their current step, and this is going to be the next step and the estimated step progression date, right? If I go ahead and refresh this report, it shows me what is there. uh, where is our employee? All right, so if it shows me that on 2010 the employee was assigned to this step and there was no previous step assignment, and then from 2010 11 onwards he has been assigned to this step. The previous step was this one, right? So this is basically showing me the entire history, and this is only showing me the audit log as to which employees are eligible and what is their current status and what is their next progression schedule. Okay, any questions on this process?
No.
All right, thank you guys. Okay, so we looked at what is automatic. Okay, let's also look at the employee profile and to see if uh, it has changed. So in worker history, you see that there's a new event generated effective 1/1/2011. So the idea is no matter from what date you run the step progression, right? So in this case, if you see, I did not specify any effective date for running this progression, right? So I just said, or the process start date is as of today. We did not specify any progression start date, right? System basically checks all the employees, and my different employees could be eligible from different dates. So no matter from which date you're running that, on which date you're running this process, system would automatically progress the employee as of date the step progression is should happen, right? So even though I'm running this process in 2020, the step progression for this employee is happening effective 2011, right? And if I go to the compensation tab, now I see that the step amount, or the uh, amount corresponding to that salary plan is 73,000. The step assigned to our employee is the second step, right? And if I go to the pay change history, I would also see that information. Okay, so uh, as I mentioned, uh, your progression report, it would uh, basically, okay, uh, progression report scans all employees, right, with compensation steps, right, and basically evaluates if the interval, right, which is period criteria, and or the step progression rule applies, right? So only if an employee for whom the interval rule, right, which has been defined, and the step progression rule applies, right, and then workday uh, progresses these employees to the next step. Okay, upon completion of the process, uh, uh, employee compensation history is updated. Okay, what else? If employee or if employees are participating in a parallel process, for example, there's already some compensation change which is in progress, or there's already a transfer is in progress, or there's already a one-time request, or maybe a merit increase process in progress. So if these employees are participating in a parallel compensation event, then Workday obviously doesn't progress them to the next step, right? And details of all these employees can be viewed in the employee compensation step progression audit report, right? So the details of all these employees for whom progression has not run because of any parallel process would be shown in this report, right? The next time, as I mentioned, system would not progress those employees, but the next time the report runs on schedule or you run it manually, right? So when the process is run, uh, these employees are included, right? And then we saw that the date of the step change is the start date of the new step, no matter when the process advances the employee, right? So no matter how many times it tries and how long, whenever it advances, uh, the start date of that step would be the date as to which he is eligible for getting on to that step. Okay, so that was your compensation steps and compensation step progression schedule and your adjustments to your compensation steps. All right, we have already seen that in order to assign any employee to any compensation event, whether it is a salary plan or a hourly plan, any other change in compensation grade profile, what you do is you initiate uh, your request compensation change process, right? Similarly, if you just want to perform a grade change on an employee, then there's a similar business process which is called request grade change, right? So if I go to the additional actions and then compensation, I think we don't have access to request grade change. This is the process I've been using called request compensation change. And there's a similar process which is called request grade change. Let me see if I can pull some employee. Let's let's look at, okay. So request grade change, and I can use this process to perform any change in employee's grade, right? Right. So this is the employee's current grade. This is the current grade profile, and I can go ahead and change for any reason that has been configured the grade and the grade profile, or just the grade profile of an employee, right? So if I only want to change the grade details or the compensation guidelines for an employee without impacting any other compensation component, then I can go ahead and use the request grade change business process. So request grade change, as I mentioned, this is used to request a change in grade of the employee, right? So either I can go to an employee's profile, or from there navigate to compensation, our usual task, and then request grade change. Or I can also go to this task directly, which is again request grade change, right? And then select the employee and then select the target grade and or the target grade profile. Okay, so that was just one of the business processes that we use to manage employees' compensation. All right, next we'll talk about the compensation grades and job profiles. So we already know that we can define uh, grade and grade profile details on the job profiles as well, right? So if I open, for example, any of the job profiles, let's look at Steve Morgan's job profile itself. If I go to uh, compensation tab, right, and open, not sorry guys, if I go to the job details and open job profile, okay, in compensation characteristics, I can define the compensation grade and the grade profile that this particular job profile is associated with, right? Okay, now any compensation grade and grade profile which is defined at the job profile level would be evaluated before or would have precedence than the compensation grade and grade profile which employee is eligible for using the eligibility rule criteria, right? What I mean by that is if an there's a job profile, let's call it job profile 1, and the compensation grade on that job profile is, let's say, CG1, and the grade profile is CGP1, right? Now I'm hiring an employee onto a position, right, which is linked to this job profile, right? Okay, now based on the eligibility criteria of the employee, right, maybe this employee is eligible for a compensation grade, and let's call this CG2, and within that grade the profile he's eligible for, let's call it CGB2, right? So now we have a conflict wherein based on the eligibility criteria, and this could be anything, right? Let's say location, let's say employee type, or management level, or basically any eligibility criteria that has been defined on those uh, grades and grade profiles. So based on the eligibility criteria, employee is eligible for this grade, and within that grade this profile, right? But then the position on which employee is hired, and by extension the job profile on which with which he is being associated with, has a different grade and grade profiles defined, then the employee would be assigned this grade and this grade profile. So the details, compensation details defined at the profile level would take precedence over your compensation eligibility rules. Okay, so how do you do that? Again, pretty simple. I can go ahead and uh, edit my job profile. Right, so here I can define for example, a different grade, and within that grade, there's just one grade profile, but I can go ahead and assign my grade and grade profile at the job profile level. Okay, let me go ahead and I'm not going to change this. Let's look at, not going to change this as well. we'll probably deal with uh, so this is the job profile. Okay, so I can define a grade uh, without defining grade profile as well. Okay, now what I can do is I can set up adjustments to the compensation grade which are assigned to job profile, right? So what happens uh, if, let's say, employees are already assigned to this particular job profile, right? And uh, this job profile has the compensation details defined, right? And now if I go ahead and change the grade on this job profile and grade profile or any one of those on the job profile, then all those employees who are already assigned to this, all those employees who are automatically assigned to that job profile, their compensation grade profile should also be adjusted automatically, right? And you can set up these adjustments to grade profiles or compensation grades which are assigned or associated with the job profile, right? So you can set up adjustments to compensation grades which are assigned to job profiles. All right, so what is the process? So you can update the grade which is assigned to, obviously, a job profile, right? So you can change a grade which is assigned to a job profile, but then you also can adjust the grades who are in that job profile, right? Because obviously uh, their grade also needs to be changed, right? Okay, how do you set this up? Again, the first thing that you'll do is you would configure the corresponding business process, which is set up grade step adjustment for job profile, right? So you would configure business process. So if you do not configure anything, guys, it system would use the default business process definition, right? Obviously it should be activated, or the default definition could have been should have been created first, but then if you have not configured any business process as such for any of your enterprise requirements, then system would use the default definition. Okay, and then obviously you'll select the job profile, and then you would set up the adjustments to that job profile. Mm, right? Set up compensation grade job profile adjustment. This is the business process. And this is the task. I don't have access to the uh, set up grade job profile. Let's see. Set up compensation grade job profile adjustment. All right, so this is a business process. Uh, let's see. I can um, and the initiating action is for compensation admin and business consult core functional uh, business process security uh, core comp uh, compensation administrators. I am a compensation administrator. Mm, okay, Logan McNeil is a compensation administrator. So, okay, sorry guys. So the task is set up compensation grade job profile adjustment. Set up compensation grade all right so and then we have this task which is this one, right? Okay, let me open this so I would select again an effective date. I would select any of the job profiles. Let's say chief. I'll not submit this because it will impact data for all the employees in the system. But then if you see, the format is uh, exactly the same. You have the name of the event, right? The reason as to why you are performing that task, right? Now, again, there are two set of options. Employees who are either in this current grade. So this job profile, it is associated with a grade, let's say a CG1. And if employees are already in that current grade, then they would automatically get assigned to the proposed grade, right? So instead of CG1, let's say you're assigning the new grade as 001 or CG2, all those employees who are already in that grade would get assigned to the new grade as well, right? But then employees who are in this job profile but still not in this particular grade at that point in time, in that case you can define the allowed actions. So either you do not adjust the grade for those employees or you adjust to the new grade, right? And then you'll go ahead and submit that request, and all employees with that grade or grade profile would get updated to the new compensation grade and grade profile. Okay, any questions, guys?
No.
All right, thank you. So I'll stop here. uh, we'll continue with this on Monday. I'll let you know the timings. Most probably it is going to start at 11 itself, but just in case we might have to end 10 minutes early because my uh, training would start at 12 o'clock sharp, right? And at least for the first day, I would want to start on time. All right, but any which ways, we will let you know the timings and if there is any cancellation as well. All right. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining. You guys have a good weekend ahead. We'll speak again on Monday. Bye, guys. Take care.